I'm Betsy Masters. I'm coming to you today from the Community College of Philadelphia. I'm an architect and a longtime member of the CCCAP board and also the Student Design Competition Committee. And on behalf of the CCCAP, we welcome you to our 2025 lecture series. And today we are really most fortunate because our three jurors are joining us to each give a lecture. And our jurors are Angela Mazzi from Cincinnati, John Dwyer from Philadelphia, and Denise Thompson from Philadelphia. And the first lecture, this one, is given by Angela Mazzi. She is an architect and principal at GBBN in Cincinnati, Ohio. She's a medical planner and focuses her practice and research in salutogenesis, equity, and sociocultural contexts. Her research provides perspective on how culture impacts user experience and underpins her practice in evidence-based design to create healthy environments. And you'll see actual examples of this in her lecture. She's also the 2024 recipient of the AIA Ohio Gold Medal. So I'm going to turn it over to Angela to give her lecture, Design for Well-Being.
Thank you, Betsy. So I am really excited to be here and have the opportunity to share all of this with you and hopefully demystify this idea of how do we put the science into design for well-being. So we're going to start with what I feel is an essential first step, which is meeting people on their own terms. Design is not a one-size-fits-all proposition. Your users have very unique needs, and if you don't take the time to learn about their cultural backgrounds, their barriers to health, then you're really not going to be able to design very effectively for them. So we need to understand the fears and limitations that might be keeping them from seeking care. What is going to make them feel like they don't belong so that they don't want to engage with the space, as well as specific needs that they might have. And I'm going to start with what is really the underlying thing in all of this, which is stress. So disease or dis-ease is really the sum of external things in our environment that are having an adverse impact on us, as well as maybe some internal things to our person. Together, they're creating stress, and there is a lot of research around stress and the inflammation chronic stress causes, and that it is really the root of many physical as well as mental illnesses. On the other side of that is the health equation. When we have resources in our environment, when we have physical resources because we're taking care of ourselves, we can reset after we encounter adversity. And that homeostasis is what is going to create health for us. Because we know that bad things can happen, but in order to reset, we need resilience. And resilience is essentially that ability to withstand or recover. And it makes sense that the more resources we have, the more resilient we can then be. And we can think about those resources as environmental or socioeconomic, but we also want to think about who has access to them and whether or not they are equitably being distributed. So at its core, salutogenesis, which is Latin for health generating, is centered around providing those resources to cope. It is a term coined by a medical anthropologist named Aaron Antonovsky, who noticed that certain patients had different outcomes than other patients, and all other things seemed to be equal, so he wondered why. And his research led him to discover that when people had more resources, they had better health outcomes than when they didn't. Now, he went on to focus his work specifically on an area called sense of coherence, but he also acknowledged that salutogenesis could have other fields of inquiries. In fact, one of his colleagues was the person, Alberto Bandura, who started working with self-efficacy, and they were contemporaries. My research has really led me to identify 5 different theories that form 5 aspects of salutogenesis. So I'll be talking about those more, but what we really want to keep in mind is that as designers, as architects, we want to think about how we can introduce resources into our work that will benefit the people using it. We also want to think about equity. So everything in our environment is something called the exposome, which really has 2 parts. There's the external part, which is things like air quality, water quality, noise and light pollution, contaminants, the weather, the traffic, all of those kinds of external things that can impact our health and well-being. But then there are the socioeconomic parts of it, which are often referred to as social determinants to health. So we know that when we have a robust social network, when we have secure and stable housing, reliable transportation, access to healthy food, a good education, we're in a safe environment. Our health is better too, because we also don't have those stressors depleting our resources. And we also know that when we think about equity, there's a lot of different things that comprise it, everything from our physical ability to gender, cultural issues, racial differences, mental abilities, even languages. And when we don't think about those issues in design, we can be unintentionally creating an inequitable environment for people. So if you are neurodiverse, for example, and you're in a typical classroom, it may be very distracting. You may even have physical symptoms like headaches that are debilitating to you and prevent you from being able to learn. So to really break down all of this much more finer detail, we're going to talk about how I use salutogenesis as a design toolkit. So we'll start with the first aspect, sense of coherence. And that is really about how meaningful, manageable, and comprehensible a space is. So some of the design prompts we can use are, how much does this space look like another space that the person may be familiar with? Can we create positive associations? Can they understand how to use the space because it feels or looks like spaces they've been in before? Can they see what to do and see the activities of others so they understand how to behave? Can we provide texture or material cues so that they can understand distance and scale, as well as the ability to understand time of day or season? All of these things help people to make sense of their environment. Self-efficacy is I can. And again, research shows that when people believe they can do something, they're far more likely to succeed even when they encounter obstacles. So in design, this is about providing users with more choice and control. Can they change the lighting, the sound, the temperature to meet their needs? Wayfinding is a big part of this. When we are lost, we don't feel very powerful. So what can we do to make it easier for people to navigate in a building? Are we inadvertently creating hierarchies? A lot of institutional buildings have things like transaction counters, which automatically creates an us versus them dynamic that disempowers the person who is not on the right side of the counter. Even things like the ability to take independent action or have ergonomic spaces to use. Furniture works for you. That's all part of sending the message to someone that they matter and that they have power. Biophilia, I relate. We are part of nature as human beings, so it should be no surprise that we are hardwired to resonate with the natural world. When we have access to nature, it resets. We're better able to concentrate, to focus, to achieve that state of homeostasis. And it's very easy to understand direct access to nature, and we should definitely think about providing that as buffer zones or respite areas. But we can also create biophilia by blurring that edge between the interior or the exterior, by thinking about access to natural light and views, using natural materials, organic forms, colors found in nature. And a lot of times we can be in an institutional or even a workplace environment where there isn't that access to nature, and we're in this very achromatic, neutral space. And our mind is continuously looping, trying to find that connection, and it can't find it. So that can be very stress-inducing, as well as preventing that stress outlet that having access to nature provides. Next up is iShelter, which is prospect and refuge. So this is about our psychological safety, the ability to have defensible space. And we can think about this in design as the ability to occupy the edge. If you walk into a room, where do you choose to sit? Usually you don't want your back exposed. A lot of modern offices are set up where people are at bench seating and their back is exposed. And I'm convinced that this is a big cause of additional stress in the workplace, because people can approach you from behind without your ability to see them coming. How can we create vantage points so people can understand choices in activities before they have to actually enter into the activity? Social choice designed for introverts and extroverts, and focal points for social activity, like a fire pit, like a gathering point, a stage. All of those kinds of things help create prospect and refuge. And the last aspect is about that reset to homeostasis. It is relaxation response, I restore. So this really is about going back, resetting the nervous system, and putting in place things in the environment that will help people do that automatically. And that can look like positive distractions, things like opportunities to walk or rock or pace, having designated spaces, using soothing sounds, calming cues like soft forms and open spaces, things that inspire delight. All of those help people to reset their nervous system. And then we're going to shift to the equity side of this. How do we apply that equity lens? And we are using a framework here that looks at 3 different issues: health beyond buildings, creating welcoming and inclusive spaces, and regenerative spaces. So health beyond buildings means that we're thinking beyond just someone being a patient having a transactional episodic experience. How can we push that care out to them instead? How can we provide wraparound services to complement the care? How can we be a net positive in the community by providing employment opportunities, career modeling, hiring from local vendors? What else can the building be? Can the building actually house other functions that are a benefit to the community? Welcoming, accessibility is a big part of that. But it's also, how safe do I feel? How culturally competent is this space? Is there psychological safety, environmental safety? Can I get there easily? Or am I forced to have a private vehicle? Can I ride my bike? All of those things are part of it. And then finally, regenerative. So it's energy efficiency is part of this, but it's not the only part. We also want to think about an equitable distribution of resources. So the building might have windows or some lovely features, but does everyone who's using the space have access to them? Is it encouraging something called active design? So stairs that make you want to climb them, encouraging activity and movement. Have we thought about accommodating need for seclusion or prayer in this space, moments for meditation or abilities to get away? All that is part of that regenerative aspect of equitable design. So to help really understand how to take all of this stuff I've been talking about and apply it to the project, we're going to use a case study. This is a comprehensive care center, so it is cancer care, heart care in one new building. And we're starting with the equity. So in this 3-story building, we really thought about including in the program wraparound services like genetic counseling, social services, psychiatric consults for mental health, care navigation, financial assistance. There's things like a teaching kitchen. So there's things in the building that automatically help you more easily remove the barriers to doing the right thing for your health and well-being. We've thought about how to make it more accessible, using non-toxic materials, cultivating that psychological safety. It is on a public transportation route, bike accessible. It is a lean building that is a low energy use, a LEED silver rated. It has an ability for everyone to be able to have access to daylight, to natural environments and staff as well as patients. And we've also thought about those spots for seclusion and reflection in the building. When we think about salutogenesis, we're going to take a little walk through the project and break this down by area. So the entry is cultivating self-empowerment right from the beginning because it's very obvious where to go and it's very accessible physically. You can see through the building. There's a lot of transparency, so you have that see and be seen aspect. You can see what's going on. There's lots of biophilic elements through the garden, the natural materials, the organic shapes, and the non-rhythmic patterns of the facade. And there's contemplative spaces and walking paths that you can see here. After you enter, you are in an atrium from which you can see every single destination in the building. So wayfinding is very clear. We've used different materials to give a unique portal to every destination to help find your way. There's texture and material cues, natural light flooding in so that you're very aware of the time of day, the season. You have these vantage points so you can see where else you might want to go. And you can see the way that nature is integrated into the building through the 3-story living wall, the material choices, the shapes and patterns, the shadows and play of light. And there's also this opportunity to self-soothe through pacing. And you can see the stair is also something that provides that active design element. In the cafe, this is an example of those wraparound services, spaces to really arrange the furniture as you need for your group size, ability to have a teaching kitchen here, to have classes in the open space. There's direct access to outdoor seating on the patio, visual complexity, and really a lot of activities that you can stage in this space. In the clinics, we really tried hard to make them very easy to navigate, to provide lots of views to the outside so you have the orientation of where you're going as well as where you came from. There are porches in the clinic that you can go outside if you want to. Every exam room features a consult corner in it so that patients can have a conversation with their clinician eye to eye, as opposed to sitting on the exam table. Staff is right in the middle and very accessible to the patients. All of this was done to help empower them. In the infusion bays, there's that same idea. There's views out to gardens. There's the ability to have social choice, whether you want to have a private infusion experience like you see in the lower right photo, or a more social open infusion experience like you see in the lower left photo. There's a gathering kitchen area where you can have a chance to talk to people, get some nourishment, move around. You have that choice. You're not confined to your recliner. In radiation oncology, the big focus here was thinking about positive distraction and really bringing nature into spaces that might not have it. In the lower right photo, you can see that non-rhythmic lighting that was done to mimic dappled light that you might find in nature. And then finally, we don't want to forget about the staff. So we worked on giving them quality respite spaces. Again, access to the outside, access to natural light, views, private spaces to reset. And their workspace also is designed to be empowering. The furniture is all sit to stand. We really thought about the ergonomics there. We thought about the need they had to collaborate with one another, as well as that experience of giving care to their patients. So in the upper right corner is another view of that consult corner. So to put all of this together, we know that there are negative external and internal impacts in the environment that we can neutralize by employing salutogenic strategies. We can do this at multiple scales to cultivate more resilience, the scale of the individual, the building, or the community. And then finally, we can also incorporate that equity lens so that we really are designing something that feels welcoming and accessible to the populations who are using it. Some additional topics I wanted to prompt you to explore is what helps patients and families to relieve stress or anxiety during a visit? What resources can you provide? How can they customize their space or their experience? What features will help them manage the information they've been given or access other resources? And finally, what resources are you providing for the staff? So think about all of that as you are embarking on a project, and you will see that these Salutogenesis toolkit prompts, as well as the equity framework, can start to provide ways to answer those questions. And it's going to be different for every project, but you're going to have those prompts there. Another resource I wanted to point you to is a paper that we've published through ACSA, and you can scan that QR code and get access to it for free directly from their website. And this talks specifically about salutogenesis and health equity. So thank you for letting me share this information with you today. And I hope this helps you to think a little bit more about how you can provide resources to cope in your work.
Thank you so much, Angela. John or Denise, do you have any comments?
I'll just say thank you. That's really great work, Angela. So it's nice to see it. And I think a lot of the same concepts I'll be presenting as well, and we'll be able to have a good overlap of conversation there.
Right.
And seeing examples, I think, really helps here. John?
Yeah, I'll echo the same from Denise. It's really great to see it, to see the work that you do and the research that backs it. It's really inspiring. I'm curious what overlaps you see between the work you're doing and public health versus personal health, as well as trauma-informed design, if there are overlaps and if that comes into your work at all.
Sure, I think there are a lot of overlaps because, you know, when we're looking at trauma-informed design, trauma makes us hypersensitive then to triggers in our environment, and psychological safety and defensible space becomes even more important. So salutogenic strategies can go a long way to complementing that delivery of care model and setting up a dynamic where the patient feels safer and more in control and more soothed. I think also when we think about public health, the equity lens helps us to be a little more focused on who we are designing for. So we have a project under construction right now in Santa Fe that serves a lot of Native American and very, very rural populations in northern New Mexico. So they're very mission driven, and it means that they're having to help people get there, pay for their stay, but keep them there for a day or two. So we have to think differently about the building that we're designing where they're coming to get care, providing access to more than just clinical care, because this is the one chance they have to kind of load up on those resources, make the connections they need to make, and then they may not come back for another month. So we've had to really beef up a lot of those amenities in the building and ancillary services and allied health groups that are going to have a presence. So we've got like a donor provided shop where you can get wigs and headscarves and prosthetics. We've got more community spaces. We've got family resource center and a family garden so that it's supporting those longer stays in the building, as well as a alternative health area where you can get additional services. So it's a little different of a program specifically because we're serving a different population, and we're having to be more sensitive and allow things like, you know, the patients will often bring gifts in like crosses or angels to their caregivers. And we wanted to create a space to display those so that that really beautiful sentiment of trust and care was something that the building got a chance to showcase.
Okay, thank you very much. And let's close out this lecture, and we will see you on the next one. Thank you.